First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming and joining us at the Darien Library. I'd especially like to thank the friends of the library who make these programs possible. I'd also like to thank Barrett Bookstore, who will have this book on their shelves. And as I said, they were very happy to take orders because it is not out until the end of the month. We've got some more people coming in. Let me tell you a little bit about Daniella before we begin. Daniella Chace is the nationally recognized clinical practitioner, author, and educator in the field of medical nutrition therapy. She is the creator and host of Nutrition Matters, a health science program covering hot topics in toxology, medicine, and nutrition, which airs on NPR nationwide. She lives in Washington State, and that's where she's joining us this evening. If you have questions or you want to just get a little more curious, her website is www.daniellechace.com. And she said she'd be happy to answer any questions during the program in the chat box, or we can take them at the end of the program. So I think we've got some people. We have a lot more coming, I think. So maybe we'll start off a little slowly, but let's get going, and I will come back at the end. Thank you.
So I'm going to go ahead and just tell you a little bit about my history. So I'm a clinical practitioner, as Kathleen mentioned, and I went to Bastyr University, which was the first fully accredited natural health sciences college in the country. So I have kind of an unusual perspective on healthcare. And in those early days, a lot of clinics didn't have nutrition and certainly not toxicology or environmental medicine focus for patient care. So right out of school, I was hired by the Cancer Treatment Centers of America to come out and develop their clinical protocols for their patients. And while I was there, I was learning so much about really how to help patients heal and how to help them stay in remission. And at that time, we were learning a lot about genetics, and that really only a tiny percentage of cancer cases are have a genetic component at all. In fact, a great majority of cancer cases, and now we're learning other health conditions too, are really about environmental exposures. So now we have a really wonderful focus through environmental medicine on this topic. And even the Center for Disease Control has now done enough research to be able to tell us that 3 to 5 times the exposure of toxins comes from inside our homes than outside our homes. And I just want to say right here that I know this kind of sounds alarming about toxins in our homes and health conditions that are related to these specific toxins, but what I'm going to explain to you is that it's really exciting because we know how to control our own environment inside our home. So we can make a significant difference in preventing disease and reducing symptoms. It's just amazing how many health symptoms are really just caused by exposure to items like consumer products that we brought into our own homes. So first I want to explain a little bit about what are toxins and what those sources are that I'm talking about. So basically, when I say toxin, I'm really talking about a toxicant. I just feel like that's a big word from toxicologists, but toxins are anything that has a health effect. And that can be anything like a chemical in a cleaning product to things that you might think of as inert, like plastics in our homes, to even vapors, to fragrances, which actually have a really profound effect on our health. So one of the questions that was sent over to me before the event here is about kind of what are the big significant toxins in 2023 that we should be thinking about avoiding. And I really like the phrasing of this because it does change, you know, every few years we get better laws in place and certain things get pulled off the market, but then other things are showing up in more and more products. So it is really important to think about what we need to pay attention to right now. And so I wanted to explain about plastics because these are really just so ubiquitous. They're all around us in our lives, in our homes. And what we know about plastics now is that they break down continually. So even something like plastic toys in your home or the plastic shell on your television set, over time, they kind of break down and release particles into the air, and we breathe those particles. And if you have plastics in your kitchen, like Tupperware containers, when food touches that, it leaches some of that plastic, the nanoplastics, the tiny, tiny plastic bits, and the microplastics, which are a little larger, and they all contain phthalates. And these phthalates affect our systems in so many ways. One way that they affect our health is that they mimic estrogen. They actually mimic hormones and can trigger things like breast cancer cells. And then something that was just more recently discovered is that phthalates from plastics, once they're in our bodies, in our bloodstream, they actually can cause atherosclerosis, so heart disease. They can bind with cholesterol in our arteries. So those are just a few reasons to avoid plastics. And one more that I think is really worth mentioning is they've discovered now that phthalates are obesogens. So these affect our metabolism and our endocrine system so dramatically that they can cause obesity, just exposure to plastic alone. So even if you're eating a great diet and you're exercising, you may have stubborn weight because you have some consistent exposure to plastics, like from drinking out of a plastic water bottle all day, something like that. So finding alternatives to plastics in your home, at first it seems a little challenging because you look around and you really just see it everywhere. But the reason that I spent the last 3 years working on this book is because I felt like the research is getting out there and people starting to understand how some of these toxins affect us, but it's really tricky to clean them up and find alternatives that are practical items that aren't too expensive and that really are ecological and available. So, so as you go through the book, it's divided into chapters that are that take you through a room by room guide, so that I can help you by identifying each of those toxic sources in each room, and then also giving you some ideas about how to clean them up, how to replace items, or sometimes how to modify an item so that you can keep that but have it sealed up so that it's not releasing toxins. So plastics, some of the kind of most concerning place that you might find plastic in your home is in your kitchen, because that's where we have, our vessels like food storage containers that hold our food. This creates another source of exposure when food is touching plastic. So it's really important to start in that room and replace like Tupperware containers with glass food storage containers. Consider something instead of plastic wrap, like beeswrap, or these beautiful little pieces of cloth with beeswax on them. And they work wonderful to just wrap up a sandwich or wrap up an avocado or use it as a lid on a container. So we're in a really great time right now because we do have access to so many of these great alternatives. They're just so much easier to get than even 3 years ago when I first started looking for better alternatives for folks. So, so there's many sections on plastics throughout the book to help you avoid those. And then while we're talking about the kitchen, another category of toxins are these polyfluorinated compounds. One of the most common is Teflon. So it's these nonstick PFAS chemicals. And it was really surprising to me as I was doing the research about these chemicals in our homes to learn that they're not just in our cookware. But I think that's where things started is, many years ago, they started using Teflon for nonstick pans. And this is a dangerous place for us to have exposure because you heat up a pan and it actually releases vapor. So even though we're ingesting some of those materials when when a pan gets damaged, and you can kind of see those scratches on the bottom of a pan, They found now that one of the most significant sources of exposure is when that pan heats up and those vapors are released. So that's one thing you can do to quickly make a difference in the health of yourself and those in the home, is to switch out Teflon pans. There's so many great alternatives. There's a really nice company. I have these pans myself. They're called Green Pan, green like the color. They're ceramic nonstick, and they are completely inert and non-toxic. They're made with minerals, so very healthy and safe. But also stainless steel works really well, and cast iron, and those are inexpensive and accessible. But with the Teflon and PFAS products, they're really throughout the house now. So becoming more and more of a concern, and you really need to pay attention, because they're in things like outdoor gear. They use them on like rain jackets, and in the spray you use on leather boots to make them waterproof, that kind of thing. So reading labels on any kind of products that you're using, and reading labels on your clothing when you're buying clothes. So an alternative to a rain jacket with Teflon would be like waxed cotton, and those are available now. Another area, something I call a super toxin throughout the book, is air fresheners. And these are just getting more and more popular, even though we're learning so much about why they're really a concern. So the name air freshener is kind of funny to me, because really these are just fragrance products. They just add fragrance to mask smells. And if you have smells in your house that you're masking, those smells are coming from something. Usually it's like a pet mess, or from kids, or maybe there's mold growing. And it's very important to remove those sources of toxins. In the book, I talk a lot about how to clean and how to remove those sources, so that you don't feel that you need to mask that with a fragrance. But air fresheners, the kind you plug in, the kind you spray around in the house, even perfumes that we put on our bodies, these all release VOCs. Those are volatile organic compounds. And they're full of solvents like benzene, and things that irritate the lungs, and that can cause asthma, and for many people triggers migraine headaches. So that's something to be very aware of. And I'll talk about essential oils in a minute, but I brought one here. I just have something to show you, just so you can kind of get a visual idea of what those look like, these little tiny bottles. But essential oils, these are a great non-toxic fragrance that you could use in your home. And they all are also antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal. So they make great cleaning products. Another kind of newer concern in the home is bromated flame retardants. So BFRs, you may have heard of those. They're used in a lot of children's clothing and sleeping bags and camping gear, but also sometimes in curtains, and used as like a spray to use on sofas and things. And it's really something that we don't need at all. In most countries, it's not used and outlawed, and it's just kind of a holdover that we still have to do some legislative work to get rid of. But it's something to keep an eye out for in your own home, is BFRs. And then another one that is kind of surprising, but bath bombs. So these are those products that you might find at Bed Bath and Beyond, or these kinds of stores, these little balls of material that when you put them in the bathtub, they fizz and they release fragrance and sometimes color. These are just full of those same chemicals that are in air fresheners, like the VOCs and the solvents. And keep in mind too that with the solvents and the VOCs, that these are compounds that our body has to flush out through the kidneys, and they can cause kidney disease, which is really a huge issue now in the US. We have 1 out of 7 people in the US dealing with kidney problems now. So the good news about this, and I just want to reiterate this right now while I'm talking about these kind of alarming things, is that if you remove these things from your home, then your body has miraculous ways of healing itself. And so you really can heal from any damage that's been caused by any of these compounds. So get rid of bath bombs. And then dryer sheets are kind of in that same category. Those are fragrances that also have the VOCs, and there's no reason to use them. So absolutely avoid dryer sheets. And then incense is another one of those fragrance products that seems more natural, but really they found a specific compound in incense that's not in other products, and it can be very damaging to the kidneys. So avoid that one too. And then another large category is memory foam. And I know this is so popular and it's used in everything from bath mats to mattresses. And sometimes they use it in furniture now. And memory foam is just a mix of plastics and chemical compounds. So alternatives are like for a mattress, you can find real sap rubber mattresses. This is what I have in my home. You know, there's companies like Savvy Rest and others that carry these, and they're completely non-toxic. And as you read through the bedroom chapter of the book, you'll be learning about all the different little critters that end up in our mattresses and pillows over the years. And so it might be time to change up the mattress anyway. So it might be a good time to think about getting a natural one. And then I just wanted to talk about fabric for a moment. So we end up having exposure through our skin from clothing, and many fabrics have synthetic dyes in them, and those will absorb through the skin and end up in our systems. And also a lot of fabrics these days are plastic. I walked through an H&M store recently and looked at all the labels on the products, and one might feel like silk and another felt like cashmere. But when I looked on the label, they all had polyamide. And so they're made out of plastic and chemicals. So with clothing, it's best to look for natural materials like wool or cotton or hemp. And now they have some really lovely bamboo fabrics. And then if you have older clothes, you know, if you're actually getting things that are hand-me-downs or you've had them a while or getting them from the Goodwill, you'll have a better chance of avoiding chemicals because those items are older, they've been washed a lot. So a lot of those chemicals have been cleaned up already, have been released from those fabrics. So they're much safer. And then also in terms of plastic fabrics, like fleece is completely made out of plastic, and microfiber cloths that you would use for cleaning, those are completely plastic too. So one of the issues with these plastic materials is that as we wash them, they break off little bits of material. Like if you think about when you put something through the dryer and you clean out the dryer lint, there's all that material in there that has come off of those items while they've been washed. And we've learned now that all these plastic clothings are releasing these microplastics into our environment. So as we think about how to avoid these toxins in our homes, it's really great to think about how we're helping the environment too, as we get away from all of these toxic items. So those are kind of some of the top toxins in the home. And then I'm looking at a list of questions over here that was sent over before today, and I'd love to just kind of go through these with you. So talking about cleaning practices. So yes, as we end up with these, all these kind of consumer products in our homes that are shedding, you know, the fabrics are releasing little bits of microplastic, our plastic toys in the home are releasing things. In fact, if you think about your house dust, there is a certain amount of dust that really is just from like human detritus, so things like hair and skin and from pets. But a majority of house dust now is actually particles from our consumer goods. And not only is it like particles of plastics, but it acts like a sponge and it actually picks up cleaning products. So if you're using chemical cleaning products in your home, scientists will actually see those chemicals in the dust material. So so our dust is really, it's something to really pay attention to. And it's one of the best ways for you to avoid exposure is by really cleaning up dust well. I was writing an article recently about house dust and came across a statistic that was really surprising to me. Um, there's so much dust in our homes now, and it can be kind of hard to see it. Sometimes it's kind of hidden behind things, or if we just don't have good light, we might not notice it. But in those days when the sun comes in the window and you see all that stuff in the air, that's dust being kicked up. So even though a lot of it settles to the ground, as we move through the house or the pets move through the house, it kicks the dust up into the air. And as it's in the air, we're breathing it in. And as we breathe it in, we ingest a great deal of dust. So researchers that did studies all across the country found that we, on average, ingest 2 tablespoons of dust a day. That statistic always gives me pause to think about how much we're really taking into our bodies, which, anything we ingest will end up in our bloodstream, and if there's toxic chemicals, that's one of our greatest vectors or exposures. So cleaning up dust is really important. And you can use air filters. I use the Dyson. It's a heater and a cooler, and it also has a HEPA filter, and it tests for formaldehyde and different solvents. But really, there's many different brands of these now that are available. And if you have a good vacuum with a HEPA filter, the filter just helps you suck up all the dirt without exposing you to dust in the air as you're vacuuming. A lot of people with asthma or respiratory issues will really notice that when they're vacuuming, that they have more exposure because they're kind of kicking it up. So a HEPA filter is really helpful for kind of sequestering that. So I also found that just going on YouTube and looking at the comparisons, there's a lot of individuals who are doing studies to determine how well certain new vacuum brands and air purifiers are working. But Dyson is what I use, and it works really well. And then in terms of cleaning up dust, there's something else to think about here. So it's these particles, but also in the average home, we have quite a bit of mold these days, and mycotoxins in the molds are also a health concern. So when I'm cleaning, I always have a little bit of the essential oils like tea tree oil in my solution to help kill any viruses or bacteria or fungus. And in the book, I just have a copy here. I'll show you. There's a whole section on cleaning solutions, and this tea tree wash is kind of my go-to. I use it for all surfaces, and it's basically just 2 cups of water and a tablespoon of a surfactant. And I use Sal Suds. It's Dr. Bronner's. It's biodegradable. It's completely non-toxic. So I've used this for many of the cleaning solutions in the book. But the reason you want something bubbly, a surfactant, is just because that will help carry away all the materials and help them release from the floor, the walls, and so on. And then adding any essential oil will work, but tea tree oil has been well studied and works extremely well to kill viruses and fungus and mold. And then there's recipes for things like for cleaning your bathtub and other ceramics. And I just add baking soda. It's completely inert, and it's a great kind of abrasive to add, and comes in cardboard. I just think that's just wonderful because it's so cheap and accessible. So when you're cleaning, using just some clean rags and some of the tea tree product, like tea tree wash, and really wiping down surfaces and getting behind things, because so often our dust will just kind of collect behind something that's big and heavy that we don't move too often, so we don't get back there with the vacuum. So that'll make a really big difference in your exposure to dust and thus chemicals. And then there's another question on this list that I think is great. It's asking about coffee pods. And this is something that I feel like is a real 2023 issue, because as I'm traveling, I see them in all the hotel rooms, and they're really a concern. When I was doing research for the book, I learned how many millions of these pods, the plastic material ends up in the garbage every day. So it's a real environmental hazard. But also these pods are made out of plastic, so there's phthalate exposure. You're pushing hot water through plastic, so really high exposure. And a lot of these coffee pods are made out of recycled plastic now. And the way that recycling works in our country, we don't have just like clean plastics that are used for food and those get recycled alone. They're just all plastics are recycled together. So, a plastic shell from a television that has a lot of bromine in it, and plastics that contain formaldehyde get thrown in with other types of plastic and remade into products. So coffee pods are a really significant source of phthalates and formaldehyde and heavy metals, and they're just terrible for the environment. So a better option is using like just a French press to make your coffee. And also, while we're talking about coffee, if you get coffee when you're out and about, be sure to bring your own mug, like a stainless steel mug or ceramic mug, because those cardboard or paper coffee cups like at Starbucks, for many years, I just thought they were lined with wax. I didn't know they were lined with plastic, but they are. So putting hot water, hot coffee in there, it can be another significant exposure for you. Anything that's kind of a daily habit is going to be a more significant source of exposure for you. And of course, drinking coffee can be one of those. Let's see. Oh, there's a question here about paper towels versus rags. And yeah, paper towels are from trees. So this is a time when we really need to be saving our trees. We need them for, to stave off climate change. And it's just so much better to use some rags. I just get the little cotton washcloths from Amazon, or you can just cut up old t-shirts or old socks, and I just use those for cleaning. They work really well. They work great on glass. And for cleaning glass, you can avoid a lot of these chemical-laden sprays by just using a little lemon juice and water or a little vinegar. All you need is just something to cut the grease a little bit. And then a nice cotton rag works really well. You just need a little elbow grease. Let's see, there's a question about bleach on here. So in general, it's a good idea to avoid bleach because it does off gas. And if you end up mixing it by mistake with something else, you can create a really toxic fume that can be really hard on the lungs. But if you have a well-ventilated area, like you open up the windows in the bathroom while you're cleaning, then you should be fine to use a very diluted bleach product for cleaning. Oh, and then label reading. Here's a good question about label reading. So one of the other kind of significant sources of toxins in our homes is through cleaning products themselves, which seems kind of anti-intuitive because you're buying something to clean with. But when you look at the labels on cleaning products, they're really full of just so many toxic ingredients, and we really need better laws about this. But the truth is that we don't need any of these commercial cleaning products. We can make our own products at home that are completely non-toxic, and there's a whole section in the book about how to do that. I'm also happy to share recipes through Instagram or on my website, so you can let me know if you need information on. I will share it other ways. And then let's see, fireplaces. So this is another one that I feel like is much newer information about how when we're burning things in our home, whether it's candles or of course cigarettes or things like that, but even our fireplaces, if they're not well ventilated, they release compounds called polyaromatic hydrocarbons. And these compounds get breathed in, and then those compounds get into our bloodstream and they act as oxidants and can increase risk for cancer and other health conditions. So if you do have a fireplace, if it has a closure like a glass screen, you'll be much safer. Make sure that the flue is cleaned really well so that it does suck out all the smoke and it doesn't come back into the house. And really only burn things on special occasions, I think, is a good kind of rule, just so that you don't have exposure, on a daily basis there. Okay, and there's a question about houseplants. This was really interesting research as I was working on kind of the air quality issues throughout the book. I came across a study that NASA did, the science organization, and they were studying plants to learn whether they could send them up in space in aircrafts to clean the air for the astronauts. And they studied something like 80 different plants, and they found that they're extremely effective at cleaning specific compounds out of the air in rooms. Like one plant in one room will do a great job of cleaning out formaldehyde and VOCs and such. So I'm a big fan of houseplants. Oh, and there's a question about baby bottles and pacifiers. And whenever I think about what we've exposed babies to, I tear up a little bit. But the good news is that we have alternatives finally. So for many years, we just had the plastic teethers and so on. But now we have natural rubber, and it's pretty easy to find. You can go on Amazon and find natural, non-toxic baby products. Thank goodness. And while we're talking about baby products, I also want to mention baby mattresses and cribs. I first learned about how toxic baby mattresses can be when a friend lost her child to sudden infant death syndrome. And I started to do research to find out what could possibly cause this. And now it is the leading theory on this is that it's the chemicals from all the plastics and the toxic chemicals that are added to baby mattresses. So there's a whole section in the book about alternatives there, and it's very important to make sure that all the materials around your baby are completely non-toxic. So really paying attention to the actual mattress itself, because the baby is face down usually on that mattress, breathing through that for many hours each day. So really important. And let's see. Oh, microwaves. So a few things about microwaves. So the kinds of vessels that you use in the microwave are very important. Using glass is the best. Some people put, cardboard like paper plates in there, but glass containers will keep you from having exposure to something plastic put in the microwave, which will then be broken down and release phthalates into your food. And people often ask me about microwaves. I want to just mention this really quick, even though I didn't include this, I don't think, in the book, but a lot of people wonder if microwaving is toxic. And from the research I've done, really, if you have a microwave that is well sealed, if your seal gets damaged, like you end up with some metal in there, like maybe a staple in a tea bag, for example, then it sends some little sparks out, and that can damage that seal. And once that seal's damaged, when you're standing outside your microwave and running it, you can have exposure to that microwave radiation. But if your microwave is fairly new and you haven't had any accidents like that, the seal should be intact and it is safe. But just use some glass containers in there. Oh, there's a great question popped up on the screen here about, is all glass the same? Is Pyrex okay? That's a great question. And yes, Pyrex is one of the best forms of glass. As far as I know, all glass is safe. But what I love about Pyrex is that you can put it in the freezer, you can put it in the oven, and it won't break. And so it's very safe and heats evenly too. So yeah, that's a great option. And let's see, do we have one more? Oh, and then there was a question about obesogens. So anything in our homes that act as an endocrine disruptor, you might be seeing this term EDC, endocrine disrupting compound or chemical. And we have many of these now. There's so much great research on chemicals that we're exposed to and how they affect our endocrine system. So that's all of our like our hormones. So thyroid to the pancreas, which controls blood sugar, to our ovaries and our estrogen, progesterone. So anything that's really affecting our endocrine system can affect metabolism. And many of these items have now been deemed obesogens in our homes. So I think it's kind of fun to think about identifying those and removing them and see how much better you feel, see if you're able to lose stubborn weight. So I hope that you can kind of think of these things as something that you have control over and the great benefit of cleaning these things out. Oh, and here's another great question about silicone products. So this is one of our kind of newer alternatives to plastic and toxic kind of rubber products. So there's natural rubber, which is from like the sap of an actual rubber tree. And then there's kind of toxic average rubber, which is like 95% of the products that you find out there, like a soft spatula. Those are actually just chemicals, just plastics. But silicone is something fairly new, and it's wonderful because it is completely inert. It's made with minerals, and it has like a 500-degree heat resistance. So if you're using a silicone spatula in a hot pan, it won't melt and won't release anything into your food. So I'm a big fan of silicone. Epicurean makes a cutting board that I love that's just pressed paper, and it doesn't dull knives, and you can run it through the dishwasher. And they use that also for a handle for their silicone spatulas, which I use all the time. I just love them. And here comes another question. If you boil cinnamon, cloves, and oranges to scent a room, is that okay? And yeah, that's brilliant. That's a great way to create a lovely all-natural fragrance in your home. I think that's a great question. Oh, and here's another question about houseplants. Which ones are best for cleaning the air? Yeah, they found that there's all houseplants do some degree of cleaning the air, but rubber plants are really good at certain compounds, and spider plants clean formaldehyde particularly well. I have a whole chart in the book that explains which plants can help clean up which toxins, but generally any plants that you have with nice surface area on the leaves are going to do a great job of cleaning up the air. Yeah. So so I think that's kind of the basics. And if Kathleen, if you have more questions from folks that you'd like me to address, I'm happy to do that. Here's another one on the screen that just popped in about do air filters eliminate dust? They can clean up some dust, but they can't eliminate it, because if you think about just sweeping the floor or vacuuming, how much dust you would end up with, like with my Dyson vacuum, it has that kind of clear cylinder and you can actually see how much you picked up. I mean, I vacuum 3 days a week and I fill that container every time. So an air filter, you would have to change it so often in an air filter that it really won't make sense. I think an air filter is great for residual dust, like after you've really vacuumed and cleaned well. Having an air filter going will help just clean up whatever kind of gets kicked up out of hidden places that you can't really get to, maybe way up high on top of the cupboards in the kitchen, that kind of thing. So you really kind of need both if you have a lot of dust. And the more of you that there are in your home, meaning like the more people, the more pets, the more cleanup you're going to have to do. Someone's asking about aluminum. So aluminum is really fascinating. I've been working with cancer patients for 30 years and have been primarily focused on breast cancer patients for about the last 20 years. And aluminum is a heavy metal, and it does cause health problems. And they found out that it's a trigger or initiator for breast cancer. And when they've done biopsies of breast cancer tissue, breast cancer tumors, they often find a concentration of aluminum there. So it's something that all of us women should be avoiding completely. So instead of using like aluminum foil in your kitchen, just use a bake pan with a lid, or use parchment paper instead of aluminum for baking and that kind of thing. Um, if you're using aluminum pie pans, switch to ceramic pie pans, and watch out for things like deodorant has aluminum in it. Many deodorants are antiperspirant products. So watch out for that and switch to something natural. And there are wonderful natural cosmetics and deodorants now. Well, there's lots of questions popping in. Someone's asking about what are my thoughts on the concept of eating dirt, or that dirt is good to be exposed to? And this is actually a really valid question, because there's been this incredible body of research about our microbiome, our microorganisms in our bodies. And the NIH, the National Institute of Health, did this huge many-year research project to learn about these organisms in our body and how much they help our health. And so a lot of folks are trying to eat food right out of the soil. Like, when you pick carrots from the garden, just brushing off the dirt and eating it without washing it, to try to get some of those good microbes, those really beneficial, like flora, like the probiotics, like Bifidobacillus and Acidophilus, into their system. But if you're actually craving dirt, it's amazing how common this health condition is, where people will actually be craving dirt because there's minerals in dirt. And if you're severely mineral deficient, that might be why you're actually having a craving. So even though that sounds like a kind of out there question, it's actually a really brilliant question. So I'm glad, thank you for bringing that up. Here's another question that's good about sponges. Okay, so sponges, wow. There's a fascinating study. I've read about this in Rob Dunn's book, Never Home Alone. Oh, love that book. He has really looked into all of these different pathogens in our homes and how common they are and how they affect us. And what they found is, in the average plastic sponge, like those yellow sponges that they sell at the grocery store, the plastic doesn't dry out well, and it really harbors organisms, and they grow really quickly. And one of the most common organisms they found in those was the organism that causes pink eye. So when you're using that sponge and it never dries out completely, you're just spreading those organisms onto the next dishes. So I'm all about natural sponges, and there's probably 15 fantastic types you can buy now. Some are made out of gourd fiber, some out of walnut fiber. Almost all of them are plant fibers, and you can find them on like helenmalon.com or Earth Hero, or even Amazon is carrying them. And my co-op carries many of these. Maybe your local co-op does too. So in fact, I'll do a post on that on my Instagram to help people find those. But that's a really great question. And then let's see, the next question here is, let's see, what would you do first to get a start on cleaning up toxic substances? Okay, so cleaning up the dust, absolutely, because then you're removing your immediate exposure, and that gives you some time to work your way through each of the rooms and identify what you might have in your home that might be exposing you, and finding ways to replace those items. And here's another great question about perfume. Okay, so there's a woman in Australia that did a lot of research on fragrances, and she found just a really significant number of folks have kind of chronic chemical sensitivity, and perfumes triggered just a range of health conditions for them, asthma and headaches and such, to the degree that they were really incapacitated, like they couldn't go to work. And so we've really gotten used to fragrances in our modern worlds, but we really need to take another look at those and be more careful and discriminate about how much we use any kind of fragranced or synthetic fragrance product. So perfumes, I would say, if you can, stick with something natural like essential oils. Avoid synthetic perfumes and don't put them directly on your body. If you're going to wear a perfume, a few days a year for special occasions, you could just mist a little bit on your clothes and don't have it on your skin, and really go easy on it. Don't use a lot. Here's another question about how do you protect yourself from exposure when you're living through a home renovation. So ventilation is really critical, opening windows, using fans to blow out dust. If you're chemically sensitive, you might have to bring someone in to do cleaning for you because that dust ends up everywhere. Using air purifiers. Now, I've found that air purifiers will work in a room, one air purifier in a room. So maybe use that in the room you're in the most often, like your office or your bedroom. And if you have a renovation crew, you could ask them to do the best job they can cleaning up before you step back into the space. Okay, here's a question about nonstick pans that are safe. So I mentioned green pans. I love those. I have them myself. Stainless steel work well. And as long as you don't cook with too high of heat, you won't burn with those. Once they get burned, then it's easier for them to be things to stick on them. But cast iron works great, but you really have to season it. So seasoning cast iron is when you put like a vegetable oil on, then you bake it in the oven so it has a kind of slicker surface, and that works wonderful. Things won't stick when it's well seasoned. But if you use soap on it, you'll wash away the seasoning and then things can stick. But keep in mind that with cast iron, it's completely non-toxic. You're not getting exposure to anything bad. It's just that it becomes trickier to cook with if it's sticking, that's all. Okay, another question. Asking for some tips on body detox. And body detoxing forever chemicals. Okay, this is a great question. So this person's asking about forever chemicals, which are things like the PFAS. That's the fluorinated compounds that are in Teflon pans. So first of all, I just want everyone to understand that our bodies have really miraculous ways of cleaning up toxins. Sometimes our bodies will sequester toxins by pulling them into body fat so they're not damaging our tissues. We have our liver in place that creates a lot of enzymes that cleave and break down toxic substances so we can excrete them through our stool and our urine. And if you eat a lot of antioxidants like fresh plant foods, those are just rich in antioxidants that help boost glutathione in the liver, which helps your body excrete these things. So we do have those things that are natural in place. And then one actual supplement that's been well studied is quercetin, and that helps clean up plastics from our bodies. Quercetin is, you don't have to buy a supplement. You can just get that from food because it's really concentrated in onions and apples. So just kind of remember that old adage of an apple a day, and that will help you a lot. Okay. Oh, more questions are popping in. Do I recommend any baby mattress companies? There are some really great ones. There's, let's see, in the Seattle area, I know we have several, and Savvy Rest, I believe that they make one also. And there's a company in Vancouver also. And I'm sorry, I don't have those brand names at my fingertips. And we removed brand names from the book. So I'll put together a list and I'll put it on Instagram. I think that's a good idea to kind of know where to find those things. When I originally looked into those, they definitely weren't all non-toxic. Even many of them were claiming to be completely green and had chemicals in them. So yeah, I'd love to share what I did learn. Oh, what is my Instagram name? That question just popped in. It's just my name, Daniella Chace. And it's my last name is spelled with a C. That's the only tricky part about finding me, Daniella Chace. And you can send me questions through messaging on Instagram, and I'll create posts for you based on your questions. You guys are my first library event and my first promotional event for the book, because it comes out just in a few weeks. So I love all your ideas. I'll be using those for my Instagram posts. Oh, and I have one more question here about drinking water. Yeah, drinking water can be contaminated. In fact, here in the Seattle area, we've had issues many times with growths that happened, little organisms, and then they added more bleach, and then the bleach, as it kills off these organisms, creates carcinogenic compounds. So I'm all for water filters. I think it's a great way to take control of your water in your house. And as long as you have a solid carbon water filter or a reverse osmosis system, those are both really effective. And I could put some names of systems that I like to up for you. Oh, and here's a question about water filters in refrigerators. Those can be really tricky. You can actually get something like a multi-pure water filter for your refrigerator, but there's still plastic tubes involved in delivering that water. So I think it's better to use that at your sink. I pulled out my little sprayer handle and put in my spigot there, so I can just go and get filtered water right at my sink. And then here's a question about Brita. So no, Britas don't work. They are plastic, they're a plastic tub, and they have granulated carbon in them. And they do take out chlorine, but chlorine's this tiny molecule that's really easy to remove, and it's not really our main concern. We're concerned more about heavy metals and forever chemicals like the PFAS. And also, well, it's any chemicals that come in through the rain into your aquifers, and that's what's delivered to your home. So a solid carbon filter is much better way to go than something like a Brita pitcher. And here's another question about nonstick pans. So again, the green pans are my favorite, but I also just love some of the ceramic. Most ceramic pans are going to be okay. Just buy from companies where you can actually access information about their materials. There are some things that come in from Mexico and other places that could have toxins in them. So you just need to research them. And if you do have questions about specific brands, you're welcome to send those on to me. And I love looking into those things. So I call the company directly and try to get answers, and I'm happy to do that. All right, well, we might have come to the end of the questions that I have here, but Kathleen, if you have more questions for me, I'm happy to address those. Well, here's one more. Is it garment that's recycled? Oh, garments that are made out of recycled materials is what you're asking. This is really getting to be a new question. I've been trying this myself, buying some of the recycled plastic, like raincoats and things. And I bought some towels that were made out of recycled plastic. And everywhere they touched my skin, I got a red rash. And so I feel nervous about using towels that are made out of recycled material. But I think we're just learning about these now, about which brands are actually safe of recycled material. So I'll start sharing more about that, but something like a raincoat should be okay for now. And there's another request about air purifiers. So why don't I post that on Instagram for everyone, and I'll put a little list up of the brands that I was able to get information about and what type of filter they have.
That sounds good. We have a couple more minutes if anyone wants to type in their questions, either in the Q&A or in the chat. Obviously, a lot of interest on air purifiers.
Mm-hmm.
And we
There's sorry.
we did talk about fast fashion, right? In the beginning.
A little bit, yeah, about the materials and the dyes and the printing. Um, yeah, let's see. Was there one more question? Um,
I guess you just have to check your labels on the clothes.
yeah, it's really hard to tell though, like children's clothes or a lot of the fast fashion, like at the Gap, I noticed the children's clothes have like these colorful silkscreen prints on them, and that's where you get a lot of the heavy metals. So just going more natural, looking for organic linen or cotton, and try to avoid those kind of plasticized logos and things like that. Um, Here's a question about certain fabrics that should be avoided. So it's really synthetic. If you see a chemical name on a label like polyamide, that's all chemicals, it's all plastic. And fleece, I grew up in an era here in Seattle where we were all buying fleece when I was younger, and it's completely plastic. So avoid that, and yeah, just try to avoid synthetics when it comes to fabrics. It's the easiest way to kind of judge for yourself.
Well, thank you. This has been so interesting and so much to think about. I can't wait for your book to come out so everyone can go get it. As I said, Barrett's will be taking some pre-orders and it will be out at the end of the month. And we want to thank you, Daniella, for coming, and we'll listen for your show on NPR. Wait, did somebody else? Oh, how about Lego plastics?
Yeah, that's plastic too. So keeping them clean, so you keep removing that dust, the plastic phthalate dust from Legos is a really good idea. So, throw them all in a little bin and rinse them and dry them off, and maybe do that once a month to clean up the residue to avoid exposure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Good information. It's just really amazing how many chemicals are in our world and we don't even know about them.
Yeah.
But good thing for plants, which we can see in your picture that you are endorsing.
Oh yeah, you can see my plants.
And if anyone has any other questions, they should reach out to you on your website or on Insta.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, right on my website, my phone number, my email's there, and you are absolutely welcome to reach out anytime. I'm always happy to answer questions, and questions give me ideas about what information people need, so I can include it in my social media and so on. So thank you.
That's great. That's great. Thank you all for coming. And remember, we always have great programs at Darien Library. We have McKinsey, when McKinsey comes to town at the end of the month. And we'd love to have you join us for that, for all you business readers. But thank you, Daniella. This has been so informative, and I'm looking forward to reading the whole book.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. And this was recorded in case you want to tell your friends about it. All right. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.